They found out you can't silence someone who isn't afraid to be alone. You can't control someone who has already chosen faith over fear every day. They found out that fear is powerless against a person who has been stripped, broken, and rebuilt with faith as their foundation. They thought they could manipulate you with fear like they did with everyone else. But you spoke a different language. You moved with the quiet confidence of someone who knows God is your source and defender. They found out faith doesn't flinch in the face of intimidation, and fear loses its bite when it comes up against someone who has decided they will not bow, no matter the cost. They learned that faith is the one language fear can't silence, and it's the only language that can't be manipulated. Number 8, they underestimated the price of touching something God called his own. They underestimated the price of touching something God called his own. They thought coming for you was just another game, another power move, another day of using intimidation, slander, and spiritual attacks to keep someone in check. They didn't think twice before speaking curses over your life, before trying to sabotage your path, before throwing spiritual darts to drain your strength. They thought it was just another target, another easy win. They didn't realize that touching you wasn't the same as touching just anyone. They forgot you're marked, that your life is wrapped in a covenant that says, "Touch not my anointed, and do my prophets no harm." They forgot that when God claims someone as his own, there is a price attached to every weapon formed against them, and that price is one they can't afford, no matter how confident they are in their darkness. They didn't see it as a declaration of war, but heaven did. When they tried to harm you, they weren't just moving against you. They were moving against the assignment God placed on your life, the promise he made to you, and the kingdom agenda tied to your existence. They were picking a fight with forces they cannot see, with armies they cannot fight, and with a God who does not lose. They thought harming you was a mistake they could fix with a fake apology or by pretending it never happened. But it doesn't work that way when you touch what God has claimed. They didn't understand that your life is bigger than you, that it's tied to freedom for others, that it's tied to generational blessings, and that interfering with you is interfering with what God is building on the earth through you. They found out the hard way that harming you came with consequences that were not delayed out of mercy, but out of timing. And when that timing came, they realized too late that it wasn't just you they touched. It was heaven's agenda, and heaven always responds when what belongs to it is threatened. Number 9, they never imagined the silent God would roar when you were touched. They never imagined the silent God would roar when you were touched. They thought God's silence meant God's absence, that the delay in consequences meant there would be no consequences. They saw you praying, staying quiet, taking the high road, and they thought it was weakness. They mocked your faith, your obedience, your decision to keep your hands clean while they threw dirt, thinking you were powerless to stop them. They believed your God wasn't going to show up for you because nothing seemed to happen when they crossed boundaries. They didn't understand that silence doesn't mean approval. Silence can be a setup, a gathering of evidence, a collection of every action they thought they got away with. They didn't know that God often lets people write their own judgment with their actions, letting them dig their own pit with every attack they send, every lie they spread, and every spiritual weapon they launch. They didn't know that God's timing is perfect, and what looks like delay to them is God aligning the moment for maximum exposure and undeniable justice. Your enemies discovered too late that your life is proof that God does not forget, that while you were in seasons where it looked like nothing was happening, God was building your character, strengthening your spirit, and protecting your destiny while quietly preparing a response that would leave no room for denial. They found out that God's roar is sudden and final, that when he moves, there's no argument, no manipulation, no reversal of the consequences they triggered. They thought you were alone in the waiting, but God was watching, and the moment they touched what he called his own, the silence broke. They didn't expect your quiet life to be the trigger for heaven's intervention. They didn't expect the silent God to roar on your behalf, showing them that divine timing may look like a delay, but when the time is right, it becomes a judgment that cannot be undone. Number 10, they never learned that chosen ones don't fight fair because God fights for them. They never learned that chosen ones don't fight fair because God fights for them. They are used to battles where fear, manipulation, and lies win. They play games where they pull strings, set traps, and watch people dance for their approval or shrink under their intimidation. They know how to wear people down until they submit, how to drain their confidence, and how to push them into silence. They believed you would be just another person stuck in their cycle of control, that you would either bow or break like the others before you. They didn't know that chosen ones don't fight on human terms because they don't have to. Chosen ones don't waste energy trying to prove themselves to people operating from insecurity. Chosen ones don't try to clear their name in rooms where God has already vindicated them in silence. Chosen ones don't throw dirt back when dirt is thrown at them because they know God handles what they could never handle in their own strength. They didn't understand that when they picked a fight with you, they were picking a fight with God's plans, and that's a fight they can't win. They thought they were playing a game of intimidation, but you were never playing. You were placed as an interruption to their cycle, a divine barrier to the destruction they've gotten away with for so long. They thought you would fall in line, but your very presence became the exposure they weren't ready for. You became the mirror showing them who they truly are. Your peace revealed their chaos. Your faith revealed their fear. Your consistency revealed their instability. Your light exposed their darkness. You didn't even have to fight because your assignment fought for you, your obedience fought for you, your surrender fought for you, and God fought for you in ways that shut down every attempt they made. They thought it was a game, but they didn't realize you were the interruption God sent to stop their games for good. They didn't know you were the stop sign, the turning point, the proof that chosen ones are untouchable, not because they're loud, but because God fights their battles and God never loses. Number 11. They were so blinded by ego that they couldn't recognize the spiritual jurisdiction they violated. They were so blinded by ego that they couldn't recognize the spiritual jurisdiction they violated. They got comfortable playing God in people's lives, thinking they could control outcomes, shut down destinies, and dictate who rises and who falls. They built their identity around the power they felt when they could break someone's spirit or manipulate someone's choices, and it made them feel untouchable. They believed their charm, intimidation, or spiritual manipulation would work every time, so they didn't stop to consider that your life was different. They didn't know that your life came with territory they had no right to touch. They didn't know there was a line they could not cross with you without provoking consequences that had nothing to do with you and everything to do with the God who sent you. They thought your silence meant they had permission, that your kindness was a weakness they could exploit, and that your patience was an invitation to play with your purpose. In their arrogance, they crossed lines with you that they never crossed with others, testing boundaries they never should have tested. They tried to curse what God had blessed, sabotage what God had ordained, and block what God had opened. They touched a life God marked as his own, a destiny tied to others' freedom, a purpose sealed in divine assignment. And in doing so, they triggered a response they could not control or reverse. Now they are paying in a currency they can't refund. The spiritual bill for touching you came due, and it is being collected in areas of their lives where they feel it most. Peace they can't buy back, opportunities drying up, connections crumbling, the same fear they tried to sow in your life visiting them in the quiet moments they can't escape. The same confusion they tried to send your way, settling in their own minds. They thought their ego could protect them from consequences, but spiritual laws don't bow to pride. They found out too late that your life isn't ordinary territory to invade, and crossing you was crossing God's line. And now, the payment required for violating that boundary is one they can't afford to repay. Number 12. They thought death was the worst they could threaten you with. They thought death was the worst they could threaten you with. They believed that by dangling the fear of loss, isolation, or even physical harm over your head, they could control your every move. They believed that if they made you fear the end, you would stop fighting, stop growing, stop speaking, and shrink back into silence like so many others they've intimidated before you. They thought death in any form would be the final card to play, the ultimate tool to stop you. They didn't know that death has already lost its power over your purpose. They didn't know that you've already died to fear, to people's opinions, to the limitations others placed on you. They didn't know that you've walked through dark valleys that would have destroyed them, yet you came out stronger, clearer, and more unstoppable than before. They didn't know that God has already resurrected parts of you that the enemy tried to kill, and every resurrection has made you even more dangerous to darkness. They didn't realize that resurrection power is not just a church phrase for you, it's your reality. You've seen dreams die and come back to life. You've seen seasons of loneliness birth unshakable strength. You've seen doors close only to watch God open better ones that no one could block. You've faced betrayals that felt like death only to watch God turn that pain into purpose. You've experienced spiritual death and divine resurrection enough times to know that death is not your end. It's a transition point for your next level. They thought threatening your life or your purpose would scare you into submission, but it only exposed how powerless they truly are. You don't fear what you've already conquered. They didn't know that death cannot kill what God has anointed to live. They didn't know that your purpose carries resurrection power that makes every attack against you fuel for your next assignment. They tried to use death as their ultimate weapon, but you live under the promise that resurrection will always have the final word. And for you, the end of one thing is just the setup for something greater they can't stop. Number 13, they found out that destroying you would have required permission they will never be granted. They found out that destroying you would have required permission they will never be granted. They assumed they could take you out the same way they took out others, through slander, spiritual attacks, betrayal, or slow, intentional discouragement. They thought if they could drain your hope, block your opportunities, or isolate you, they could kill your purpose without even touching your physical life. They saw how easy it was to break others and thought you would be no different. They didn't realize that your assignment came with divine clearance that cannot be revoked by their opinions, threats, or witchcraft. They didn't know that before you were even born, your assignment was stamped with protection they can't bypass, no matter how spiritually skilled or manipulative they are. They didn't understand that your life is hidden in God, and to destroy you would mean going through Him first, a battle they will never win. They saw too late that your purpose is sealed by a higher authority that they can't petition, bribe, or manipulate. They can't send enough curses, lies, or confusion to alter what God has already established over your life. They can't gather enough people to agree with their plans against you to overturn what heaven has decreed. Their attacks can touch your environment, your emotions, or your schedule, but they can never touch the core of your assignment. And that is why you keep rising. They thought they had the final say over your destiny, but your life has been locked under God's authority, and no matter how much they want to destroy you, permission will never be granted. Every attempt they make is wasted energy. Every attack they send is redirected. Every plot they form is turned into evidence against them. They thought they had power over your future, but they learned too late that your calling is off limits. Your assignment is God's property, and your purpose is guarded by a covenant that cannot be cancelled, paused, or killed, no matter who desires your downfall. Number 14. They discovered that the easiest person in the room to approach was the last person they should have touched. They discovered that the easiest person in the room to approach was the last person they should have touched. They saw your quiet spirit, your welcoming energy, and your willingness to help, and they mistook it for easy access. They thought they could dump their darkness on you, pull you into their games, drain your strength, and keep you small while they benefited from your light. They thought because you were approachable, you were unprotected, and because you were calm, you were powerless. They didn't know you were hidden in God's hand the entire time. Every room you walked into, you carried divine backing they couldn't see. Every conversation you had, you were led by a wisdom they couldn't manipulate. Every attack they sent was recorded by the God who fights for you, the God who sees in secret and repays in the open. They thought you were alone, but your solitude was never emptiness. It was God's positioning, keeping you hidden until the right moment. Now the hand they provoked has turned against them. The same God they mocked when they mocked you, the same God they ignored while plotting against you, is the God defending you in ways they can't fight. They are facing consequences they didn't expect because they crossed a boundary they didn't respect. What looked like an easy win became the fight they cannot win. What they thought was a powerless target was actually the assignment they could never destroy. They found out the hard way that touching you was not a small mistake. It was a direct violation of spiritual laws, and now the covering that protected you is the force that is correcting them.